Hi everyone, welcome again to the continuation of the series of lectures on civil procedure. Our topic for today is dismissal of actions. So when we speak of dismissal of actions under Rule 17, we are talking of a dismissal at the instance of or due to the fault of the plaintiff. So Rule 17 is limited to dismissal of actions at the instance of, meaning by notice or by motion, or due to the fault of the plaintiff. So, um, Section 1 speaks of dismissal by notice. So, how do you dismiss an action by mere notice of the plaintiff? Section 1 tells us that a complaint may be dismissed by the plaintiff by filing a notice of dismissal at any time before the service of the answer or of a motion for summary judgment. So, within the 30-day period from the time of the service of summons, okay, which is also the time for the filing of responsive pleading, such as an answer, the plaintiff enjoys the right to file a notice of dismissal. Okay. Upon such notice being filed, the court shall issue an order confirming the dismissal. So the notice of dismissal is only a notice to the court. It is not, the court does not exercise any discretion on the notice of dismissal. So when it issues an order, the court will merely confirm the notice of dismissal filed by the plaintiff. Unless otherwise stated in the notice, the dismissal is without prejudice. Why? Because dismissal upon notice is a matter of right. Remember, the issues have not yet been joined. There is as yet no answer or responsive pleading filed by the defendant. Okay? The only exception to this rule that a dismissal upon notice is without prejudice is the two dismissal rule. What is this rule? The exception is that a notice operates as an adjudication upon the merits when filed by the plaintiff who has once dismissed in a competent court an action based on or including the same claim. So, if the plaintiff has already filed previously an action and it was dismissed by notice previously, the subsequent filing of another action and the subsequent filing of a notice of dismissal of the second action, okay, operates as an adjudication on the merits, okay, of the second action. So a third action will no longer be entertained. Okay, so that is the two dismissal rule. But as a general rule, if the plaintiff dismisses an action by mere notice before the filing of the answer, okay, the said dismissal is without prejudice. The plaintiff can refile. Okay. So another dismissal is upon motion of the plaintiff. So the first dismissal is upon notice only. The second kind of dismissal is upon motion. Okay, Section 2 tells us that a complaint shall not be dismissed at the plaintiff's instance, save upon approval of the court and upon such terms as the court deems proper. If a counterclaim has been pleaded by a defendant prior to the service upon him, the plaintiff's motion for dismissal, the dismissal shall be limited to the complaint. The dismissal shall be without prejudice to the right of the defendant to prosecute his counterclaim in a separate action unless within 15 days from notice of the motion, he manifests his preference to have his counterclaim resolved in the same action. Okay, so once the answer has already been filed, can the plaintiff move for dismissal? The answer is yes. Not by mere notice, but by the filing of a motion. Okay. So, upon the filing of a motion, okay, by the plaintiff, okay, and upon service to the defendant has two options. Either he prosecutes his counterclaim pleaded in his answer in that case, or he prosecutes it separately in another case by filing another case. Okay. So if, for example, he decides to prosecute his counterclaim in the case which was filed by the plaintiff, okay, he has to file a manifestation within 15 days from receipt of the motion. Otherwise, okay, the case will be dismissed. The complaint will be dismissed. Now, the defendant will enjoy his right to prosecute his counterclaim in another action. Not in that action, but in another action. Okay, if he wants to prosecute it in the same action, which was filed by the plaintiff, he has to file a manifestation within 15 days from notice of the motion. Okay. Confirmation of the notice of dismissal, as I was saying a while ago, the court has no discretion, but merely to confirm the notice of dismissal because once, when the plaintiff files his complaint and there is as yet no answer, dismissal is a matter of right on the part of the plaintiff. Okay, the dismissal, of course, will be without prejudice unless this is the second time that the plaintiff has filed a notice of dismissal. Okay, the second notice of dismissal shall bar him from refiling the action for the third time. The purpose, of course, of this rule is to avoid vexatious litigation. Okay? And also, the two dismissal rule will not apply if the prior dismissal was at the instance of the defendant. So when we speak of a two dismissal rule, the dismissal must be at the instance of the plaintiff. Okay. Now, what are the requirements for the application of two dismissal rule? First, there is a previous case that was dismissed by a competent court. Both cases were based on or include the same claim. Both notices of dismissal were filed by the plaintiff. When the motion to dismiss filed by the plaintiff was consented to by the defendant on the ground that the latter paid and satisfied all the claims of the court. Okay. The dismissal under the two dismissal rule may be invoked by the defendant in a motion to dismiss citing res judicata. So it is in effect a dismissal with prejudice. It can be cited as a bar to a relitigation. Okay, citing res judicata. Okay, we have the case of Ching versus Cheng. So in this case, the issue is whether the trial court's dismissal of the second case operated as a bar to the filing of the third case as per the two dismissal rule. So the court discussed the requirements for the application of the two dismissal rule, and that the purpose of the two dismissal rule is to avoid vexatious litigation. The trial court dismissed the first case by granting the motion to dismiss filed by the defendants. So the dismissal of the first case was done at the instance of the defendant. So remember, when we speak of the two dismissal rule, the two dismissal should be at the instance of the plaintiff. If in one of the dismissals it was filed by the defendant, then the two dismissal rule will have no application. Thus, when the respondents filed the second case, they were merely refiling the same claim that was previously dismissed. When they moved to dismiss the second case, the motion to dismiss can be considered as the first dismissal at the plaintiff's instance. So the two dismissal rule will not be applied if one of the dismissals is at the instance of the defendant. Okay. Now we go to dismissal by plaintiff's motion under Section 2 of Rule 17. After an answer or motion for summary judgment has been filed, both the dismissal of the plaintiff's complaint through a motion requires court approval. So unlike a notice of dismissal before the filing of the answer, which only requires confirmation from the court, a motion, okay, for the dismissal of the complaint needs to have court approval. So the court can validly exercise its discretion in deciding whether to grant or deny the plaintiff's motion for dismissal of the complaint. And when the court grants the motion for dismissal of the complaint, the dismissal is only limited to the complaint. So there is a distinction between dismissal of the case as compared to dismissal of the complaint. So when the plaintiff moves for the dismissal of the complaint, the dismissal is only limited to the complaint. How about the counterclaims pleaded in the answer of the defendant? The defendant's counterclaims may or may not continue in the same action, depending on the choice of the defendant. Okay. So if no manifestation is filed by the defendant, it is understood that he intends to pursue his counterclaim in a separate action. So once the defendant is served with a with a motion for the dismissal of the complaint by the plaintiff, okay, the defendant has the obligation or duty to inform the court if he intends to continue his counterclaim in the same action or if he wants to have it prosecuted in another action. So if there is no manifestation, it is understood that the defendant chose to prosecute his counterclaim in a separate action. But if he files a manifestation, the counterclaim will continue to be prosecuted in that same action. So the dismissal will only be limited to the complaint. Okay. The 15-day period is mandatory. Upon expiration of the said period, the court can no longer allow the counterclaim to proceed in the same action. When we speak of counterclaims, we speak of both permissive and compulsory counterclaim. So the disposition of the counterclaim no longer depends on the survival of the main complaint. Hence, the court cannot dismiss the counterclaim because of the dismissal of the complaint. A class suit, however, shall not be dismissed without the prior approval of the court, regardless of the time when the plaintiff intends to dismiss the complaint. We have the case of Blay versus Bana. So in this case, the petitioner filed a complaint for declaration of nullity of marriage and an answer has been filed. Okay, petitioner later lost interest over the case and filed a motion to withdraw the petition. She prayed that her counterclaims, the respondent prayed that her counterclaims be declared as remaining for the court's independent adjudication. Petitioner filed his reply averring that the counterclaims are barred from being prosecuted in the same action due to her failure to file a manifestation within 15 days from the notice of the motion to withdraw. Okay, again, a dismissal of an action is different from a dismissal of the complaint. For this reason, since only the complaint and not the action is dismissed, the defendant, in spite of the dismissal, may still prosecute his counterclaim in the same action. If the defendant so desires that his counterclaim be prosecuted in the same action, he is required to file a manifestation within 15 days from notice of the motion. Otherwise, his counterclaim may be prosecuted in a separate action. If he opts for the first alternative, the court will render the corresponding order granting and reserving his right to prosecute his claim in a separate complaint. Should he choose to have his counterclaim disposed of in the same action where the complaint had been dismissed, he must manifest within 15 days from notice to him of the plaintiff's motion to dismiss. The passing of the 15-day period triggers the finality of the court's dismissal of the complaint and hence bars the conduct of further proceedings. In order to obviate this finality, the defendant is required to file the required manifestation within the said period. Otherwise, the counterclaim may be prosecuted only in a separate action. So you must remember, the filing of the manifestation must be within 15 days from service to him of the motion to dismiss by the plaintiff. It is not within 15 days from receipt of the order approving or granting the motion to dismiss. It is within 15 days from service to the defendant of the motion to dismiss filed by the plaintiff. He must inform the court that he intends to prosecute his counterclaim in the same action. Okay? Okay, the third kind of dismissal, okay, which is due to the fault of the plaintiff is under Section 3 of Rule 17. If for no justifiable cause, the plaintiff fails to appear on the date of the trial to present his evidence in chief, or to prosecute his action for an unreasonable length of time, or to comply with these rules or the order of the court, the complaint may be dismissed upon motion of the defendant or upon the court's own motion, without prejudice to the right of the defendant to prosecute his counterclaim in the same or in a separate action. The dismissal shall have the effect of an adjudication on the merits unless otherwise declared by the court. Okay, so once the trial begins, okay, and if, for example, the plaintiff fails to appear on the date of the presentation of his evidence, or repeatedly has been absent for several times, resulting in failure to prosecute his action, or to comply with an order of the court, the defendant may move to dismiss the complaint. Okay? Or the court may, on its own, motu proprio, okay, dismiss the complaint for failure of the plaintiff to prosecute his action for an unreasonable length of time. The dismissal for this time will be with prejudice unless otherwise declared by the court. It can be invoked as res judicata in the subsequent refiling of the case. Okay. Dismissal of a counterclaim, cross-claim, or third-party complaint, the provisions of this rule, meaning Rule 17, shall apply to the dismissal of any counterclaim, cross-claim, or third-party complaint. A voluntary dismissal by the claimant by notice shall be made before a responsive pleading or a motion for summary judgment is served, or if there is none, before the introduction of evidence at the trial or hearing. Okay? We have the case of Roasters versus Viola. So in this case, respondents Gaviola filed a complaint for damages against Roasters. Okay, because one of the members of the family was hospitalized due to acute gastroenteritis. Okay, and a possible food poisoning when they dined at Kenny Rogers. So the petitioner filed a motion to dismiss. on the ground of failure of Gabiola to prosecute their case, alleging that respondents had not filed any pleading to revive or reactivate their case since the decision of the Court of Appeals has become final and executed. So the respondents failed to attend the hearing. Consequently, the trial court issued an order dismissing the complaint for failure to prosecute. Okay. An action may be dismissed for failure to prosecute in any of the following instances. If the plaintiff fails to appear at the time of the trial, if he fails to prosecute the action for an unreasonable length of time, or if he fails to comply with the rules or any order of the court. So the fundamental test for non-prosecutor is whether, under the circumstances, the plaintiff is chargeable with want of diligence in failing to prosecute for an unreasonable length of time. They made excuses one after another in order to explain their failure to appear on the date of the initial hearing. So the actions exhibited by the respondents demonstrate their lack of interest in prosecuting the case. Almost 2 years had lapsed from the finality of the CA decision, but respondents have not filed any pleading to revive the case. Respondents acted only upon the behest of petitioner who filed a motion to dismiss. So remember, dismissal under Section 3 based on non-prosecutor, okay, relates to the neglect of the plaintiff to actively prosecute his case during the trial proper. Okay, during the trial proper. So if he fails to present his evidence, fails to comply with the order of the court, then the court may on its own or upon motion of the defendant may have the case dismissed, and the dismissal shall be with prejudice rather. Okay? Limtek Chuan versus Uy. Petitioner faults the RTC for dismissing the case in its entirety. And he filed his opposition and expressed his preference to have his counterclaim resolved in the same action. Okay? The RTC erred when it dismissed the case when the present rules state that the dismissal shall be limited only to the complaint. A dismissal of an action is different from a mere dismissal of the complaint. Since only the complaint and not the action is dismissed, the defendant, in spite of the dismissal, may still prosecute his counterclaim in the same action. The dismissal of the complaint does not necessarily result to the dismissal of the counterclaim. So in this case, the petitioner's preference to have his counterclaim be prosecuted in the same action was timely manifested. So 15 days from receipt of the motion to dismiss. Thus, the petitioner's manifestation of his preference to have his counterclaim prosecuted in the same action is valid and in accordance with Section 2 of Rule 70. Okay, now we go to res judicata. Res judicata is one of the grounds for a motion to dismiss. Dismissal due to any of the following grounds shall bar the refiling of the same. Okay, dismissal with prejudice. Cause of action is barred by prior judgment. Cause of action is barred by the statute of limitations. Claim or demand of the plaintiff was paid, waived, abandoned, or extinguished. The claim of the plaintiff is unenforceable under the statute of frauds. So the remedy of the plaintiff is to file an appeal of the order of dismissal under Rule 45 for pure questions of law and Rule 65 for grave abuse of discretion. Laches may also be a ground for dismissal of an action. Summary hearing may be conducted as laches may be raised as an affirmative defense in the answer. Okay, now what are the elements of res judicata? There is a former judgment which has already attained finality. The court which rendered the judgment has jurisdiction over the subject matter and the parties. The judgment must be on the merits, and there must be between the first and the second actions, identity of parties, subject matter, and cause of action. Remember, res judicata is barred by prior judgment. So necessarily, there must be a prior final judgment, and the court which rendered it has jurisdiction. It is a judgment on the merits, and there has to be identity of party, subject matter, and causes of action. So we have the case of Pels Energy versus Province of Batangas. Res judicata pervades every organized system of jurisprudence, and it is grounded on public policy and necessity. There should be an end to litigation and to the hardship of an individual for being vexed twice for the same cause. Courts will simply refuse to reopen what has been decided. They will not allow the same parties to litigate a new question once it has been considered and decided with finality. Litigations must end and terminate sometime and somewhere. Okay? So, in order to avoid vexatious litigation, that is the reason behind res judicata. See, it is the equivalent of double jeopardy in civil cases. So if in criminal cases you have double jeopardy, no person shall be twice put in jeopardy for the same offense. This is the equivalent of double jeopardy with respect to civil cases. In civil cases, we have res judicata. Okay, one of the requirements for res judicata is substantial identity of parties. So in order for res judicata to apply, is it needed that the parties must be exactly identical? So in the first and the second case, there has to be exact identity of parties. The answer is no. Then what is only needed is substantial identity of parties. Now, Pels tells us that there is substantial identity when there is community of interest or privity of interest between a party in the first and a party in the second case, even if the first case did not impede the latter. In this case, Pels gave NAPOCOR the full power and authority to represent it in any proceeding regarding the real property assessment. Therefore, when NAPOCOR filed its petition for review, it did so not only on its behalf, but also on behalf of Pels. So, and therefore, Pels and NPC are substantially identical parties as to warrant the application of res judicata. Also, the case of Yap versus Chua. Okay. Yap versus Chua involves litis pendentia and res judicata. Okay. In this case, the relief sought by Chua in civil case number 6236 was for Yap to pay the amount that he owed to Chua based on several BPI checks. On the other hand, the relief prayed for by Yap in another civil case, 04030, was for BPI checks that he issued to Chua, purportedly without any valid consideration, to be declared as null and void. So the cause of action of Yap in 0430 was also his defense in 6236. So Branch 23 of the RTC in General Santos ruled that the checks were validly issued and declared Chua as a holder in due course. The lack of consideration was raised as an affirmative defense and as the basis for his counterclaim in 6236. Therefore, the RTC of Makati committed grave abuse of discretion when it took cognizance of the other civil case, 030, and denied Chua's motion to dismiss on account of the pendency of another action in another court between them for the same case. Yap, in filing civil case 030, also violated the rule against forum shopping, which is the filing of two or more actions involving the same parties for the same cause, either simultaneously or successively, on the supposition that one or the other court would make a favorable disposition. Forum shopping trifles with the courts, abuses their processes, degrades the administration of justice, and congests court dockets. So what is critical is the vexation brought upon the courts and the litigants by a party who ask different courts to rule on the same or related causes and grant the same or substantially the same relief, creating the possibility of conflicting decisions. The test for determining forum shopping is whether the two or more cases pending there is identity of parties, rights or causes of action, and reliefs. When you say also identity of causes of action, it does not mean absolute identity. Otherwise, a party could escape the operation of res judicata by changing the form of the action or the relief suit. So the test that should be applied to determine whether the causes of action are identical is to ascertain whether the same evidence will sustain both actions, or whether there is identity in the facts essential to the maintenance of the two actions. So, remember in the case of Yap, okay, in the first case, Yap used as an affirmative defense, okay, the cause of action that he used for the second case. So, in this case, the Supreme Court ruled that the same evidence would sustain both actions. The same evidence would be used to prove their cause of action in the two cases. A party cannot, by varying the form of action or adopting a different method of presenting his case, escape the operation of the principle that one and the same cause of action shall not be twice litigated between the same parties. Also fundamental is the test of determining whether the cause of action in the second case existed at the time of the filing of the first complaint. So this court takes note of the fact that Yap filed this complaint for the annulment of the checks he issued to Chua after he was adjudged by the RTC of General Santos liable. This strikes the court as indicative of his deliberate and willful attempt to render nugatory and defeat the adverse decision of the RTC of Gen San and relieve himself of his obligation to pay by having the checks he issued annulled, albeit the remedy of appeal was available and which he in fact resorted to. By seeking to cancel such checks, Yap attempted to use the RTC of Makati to destroy the evidentiary foundation of the RTC of Gen San. In doing so, Yap trifled with court processes and exposed the courts to the possibility of rendering conflicting decisions. Yap sought to accomplish the prohibited, a court reversing a decision rendered by a court of co-equal rank. Our judicial system is rendered vulnerable to such uncertainties and vexations that any and all efforts to forum shop should be treated with aversion. Okay, so I made here an illustration regarding dismissal of actions. I presented it using a timeline from the filing of the complaint to the resting of the plaintiff. Remember that Rule 17 speaks of dismissals at the instance of or due to the fault of the plaintiff. Okay, so at the time of the filing of the complaint to the time, okay, of the filing of the answer. So you have 30 days, di ba? So from the time of the receipt of the summons by the defendant has a 30-day period. Now, before receipt of the answer or a motion for summary judgment, the plaintiff, if he wants to, can file a notice of dismissal under Section 1. Okay? If the said notice of dismissal is confirmed by the court, the dismissal will be without prejudice. Okay. Of course, subject to the two dismissal rule, okay, wherein if the plaintiff has previously filed a case and had it dismissed by notice, okay, the dismissal of the second case also by notice at the instance of the plaintiff will operate as a judgment on the merits and will bar the subsequent refiling for the third time, okay, of the same case because the dismissal will be with prejudice. Now, once an answer has been filed, okay, the plaintiff can only dismiss the complaint by motion. So, a motion will be filed by the plaintiff for the dismissal of the case. Okay, the dismissal will also be without prejudice to the refiling of the same. Now, the dismissal by motion of the plaintiff is only limited to the complaint. So it is only the complaint which is dismissed. Because how about the counterclaim, whether permissive or compulsory, raised in the answer? So if there is a counterclaim raised in the answer, the defendant now has the option to choose whether or not the counterclaim will be prosecuted in the same action or he intends to file another case to prosecute the counterclaim. If the defendant wants to prosecute his counterclaim in the same action, he has to file a manifestation within 15 days from receipt of the motion of the plaintiff. Otherwise, the court will, if the court grants the dismissal of the complaint and there is no manifestation that is received from the defendant, it is understood that the defendant will prosecute his counterclaim not in the same action but in a separate action. Okay. Now we go when the pre-trial, during the pre-trial, okay, if the plaintiff and the counsel fails to appear, okay, the case may also be dismissed. Okay. Now, the dismissal will be with prejudice unless otherwise ordered by the court. The same is also true if the plaintiff fails to file his pre-trial brief. The case may also be dismissed. Now, when trial proper commences, the complaint may be dismissed at the, due to the fault of the plaintiff. Okay, for failure to prosecute his case for an unreasonable length of time, failure to appear during the presentation of evidence in chief, and failure to comply with the order of the court. However, the motion to dismiss in this case shall be filed by the defendant. So there has to be a motion to dismiss coming from the defendant or motu proprio by the court. Now, at the time of the resting of the plaintiff, after admission of the formal offer of evidence, okay, the complaint may also be dismissed upon the instance of the defendant through the filing of a demurrer to evidence. This is at the instance of the defendant, not the accused. There is a mistake in the slide. So at the instance of the defendant. Okay, so that is all for dismissal of actions. Thank you for listening.